Hey folks, back with another video. Let's dive into what stories got my attention today. Starting with Ethiopia, Ethiopia's Prime Minister on Tuesday declared the final and crucial military operation will launch in the coming days against the government of the country's rebellious northern Tigray region. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, in a social media post, said a 3-day deadline given to the Tigray region's leaders and special forces had expired. Abiy continues to reject international pleas for dialogue and de-escalation in the two-week conflict in the Horn of Africa that has spilled into neighboring Eritrea and sent more than 27,000 frightened Ethiopian refugees pouring into Sudan. It is estimated that about 4,000 refugees are arriving every day into Sudan, according to the UN Refugee Agency spokesman Babar Baloch, who told reporters in Geneva, quote, "It is a huge number in a matter of days. It overwhelms the whole system." End quote. Now, that remote part of Sudan hasn't seen such an influx in 2 decades, added later. He added to it. Now, alarmed African neighbors, including Uganda and Kenya, are calling for a peaceful resolution, but Abiy's government regards the Tigray regional government as illegal after it defiantly held a local election in September, something that sparked the whole conflict in Ethiopia. Ethiopia's federal government on Tuesday also confirmed carrying out new airstrikes outside the Tigray capital of Mekelle, calling them, quote, "precision-led and surgical," end quote, and denying the Tigray government's assertion that civilians had been killed. Tigray TV showed what appeared to be a bombed-out residential area with damaged roofs and craters in the ground. Communication and transport links with the Tigray region remain almost completely cut off, making it difficult to verify either side's claim. Now, don't expect a quick end to this conflict. I mean, Murphy's Law, which I think is apt to be repeated in Ethiopia's civil war, which is that Murphy's Law is going to show its ugly face in Ethiopia. I mean, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. It seems that in the case of Ethiopia, anytime the government is going to mess it up, it is going to mess it up. I believe that the civil war in Ethiopia is far from over. Moving over to Afghanistan and Iraq, and specifically the Pentagon. According to a report from CNN, U.S. military commanders are expecting an order from President Trump to begin further troop withdrawals in Afghanistan and Iraq. CNN cites two anonymous U.S. officials who say the Pentagon has already received a notice known as a warning order to prepare for troop drawdowns. The officials said the plan is to bring troop numbers down to 2,500 in Afghanistan and 2,500 in Iraq by January 15th. There are currently approximately 4,500 troops in Afghanistan and 3,000 troops in Iraq. President Trump's Pentagon shakeup that started with the firing of Defense Secretary Mark Esper was reported to be related to disagreements over troop withdrawals. The U.S. Taliban peace deal paved the way for all the foreign forces to leave Afghanistan by spring 2021, but U.S. officials regularly stress the withdrawal is, quote, conditions-based, end quote. Acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller sent a memo to the Pentagon last Friday that made a strong statement against the quote-unquote perpetual war, but also said that the war against Al-Qaeda, quote, isn't over, end quote. Now it is time we start to fight the terrorists in a different plane. I believe that we have to bankrupt terrorism financially and intellectually. But most importantly, we must bankrupt terrorism on a moral ground and make terrorism a morally weak position for anyone to hold. Moving over to Thailand, the Thai police blasted protesters with water cannon and used tear gas on Tuesday, hurting several people in a bid to push back a demonstration at the parliament demanding constitutional changes that would touch on the powerful monarchy. Police sprayed water cannons at protesters who tried to cut their way through razor wire barricades. Then they fired tear gas at the hundreds of demonstrators. Ambulances ferried the injured to hospital. Bangkok's Erawan Medical Center said 5 people were hospitalized due to tear gas and others were treated at the scene. The Free Youth protest group posted pictures of riot police on Twitter with the caption, quote, "Dictators, lackeys," end quote. Police declared that protests were banned within 50 meters of the area. Lawmakers are currently discussing several proposals for the way in which the constitution can be amended, some of which would exclude the possibility of changes in the way King Maha Vajiralongkorn monarchy is treated under the constitution. There is also discussion of the role of the upper house Senate, which was entirely selected by Prayut's former junta and helped ensure that he kept power with a parliamentary majority after a disputed election last year. Prayut claims the vote was fair. Opposition parliamentarians have also called for changes to the constitution. Protests that picked up in July initially targeted Prayut and constitutional changes, but have since called for the monarch's role to be more clearly accountable under the constitution and for the reversal of changes that gave the current king personal control of the royal fortune and some army units. Now, before the anti-government protesters reached parliament, several hundred royalists gathered there to urge lawmakers not to make changes to the constitution. Protesters have repeatedly said that they do not want to abolish the monarchy. And I also think that abolishing the monarchy will not do much for the people of Thailand. I believe that reform is the way forward. Moving on to Armenia, ever since the whole dispute erupted in the Nagorno-Karabakh region, a team of historians have worked to bring hundreds of ancient Armenian manuscripts to safety for fear they might be destroyed by artillery or vandalism. Of course, behind a thick walled door at the Metenadrin Gendzasar Cultural Center in Armenia's capital Yerevan, troves of Armenian manuscripts, some dating as far back as the 13th century, can be found. They have been moved there from their sister complex in the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh as Armenia's reignited conflict with Azerbaijan threatens their existence. Now, the manuscripts are an important part of Armenia's cultural heritage, many documenting its deep and often troubled relations with its neighbor. Now, in wars generally, there are several things that are a casualty, the first being the truth. But of course, there is, when once a war starts, there is an actual, harm to the environment that is also done. But also, our heritage also becomes victim of the war. And hopefully that this has, the historians have managed to preserve the 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 manuscripts and the heritage as much as they could given the circumstances they were in. Moving on to the Japan and Australia's situation, Japan's Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga said on Tuesday that Japan and Australia had reached a broad agreement on the bilateral defense pact to facilitate more joint operations and exercises on each other's soil. The developments further strengthen the defense ties between the two US allies at a time when China is asserting its role in the region and the United States is going through a leadership transition. The pact, called the Reciprocal Access Agreement, is as a legal framework to allow the troops to visit each other's country and conduct training and joint operations. Suga made the comments during a joint news conference with Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who is visiting Tokyo. It will be Japan's first agreement covering foreign military presence in its territory since it signed a Status of Forces agreement in 1960 with the USA. The countries have been negotiating the defense deal for 6 years, and the agreement still needs to be ratified by the lawmakers. Of course, signing defense pact is definitely, in my estimation, a power projection move from Suga to gain both legitimacy in the eyes of both domestically and in foreign affairs. And I think a few more defense pacts will strengthen Japan in their position vis-a-vis Beijing. Well, that's it for this video. If you like the video, hit that like button and hit that subscribe button for future updates. Write in the comment section your thoughts, comments, and any criticism you might have, and anything I might have missed. And I will see you in the next video.